Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn Chapter 4 Timeline and Sources of History from your social science textbook. In this video, I'll be covering each and every line from the chapter so you don't miss anything important. Make sure to keep your notebook and pen ready to take notes while watching. This will help you remember the concepts better. I will explain the concepts clearly and you can pause or rewind any time to write things down. So, let's begin. History is an unending dialogue between present and the past, between the society of today and the society of yesterday. We can fully understand the present only in the light of the past. Quote by E.H. Carr. E.H. Carr was a famous historian. He was born in 1892 in England and lived until 1982. He wrote a well-known book called What is History that explains how we should think about history. Carr believed that history is not just about remembering dates and facts, it's also about thinking carefully and asking questions about why things happened. So what does this quote mean? This quote tells us that history is like a never-ending conversation between what is happening now and what happened long ago. The past and the present are connected. To understand the world today, like why we have schools, governments, festivals, or even wars, we need to know what happened in the past. So the big questions are, how do we measure historical time? How can various sources help us understand history? How did early humans live? So in this chapter, we will learn how to measure time in history using years, centuries and timelines. We will explore different sources like tools, coins, books and buildings to understand the past. These sources help us learn what life was like long ago. We'll also discover how early humans lived, hunted, gathered food, and slowly formed communities. You will discover in science that the earth has a very long history, of which we humans occupy only a tiny part, the most recent one. So, what is the meaning of history? History means the study of the human past. That is, the study of everything that happened to humans in the past. It helps us understand how people lived, what they did, and how the world changed over time. So, what does this paragraph means? It means that the Earth is almost 4.5 billion years old. Humans have existed for only a tiny part of that time. Our presence is very recent in the planet's long timeline. In this picture, we see a timeline showing some important events in the history of Earth. It helps us understand how life began, starting from tiny cells and slowly changing over millions of years. We can see how living things became more complex, leading to the rise of animals, dinosaurs, and finally human beings, that is, Homo sapiens. Many people study the history of the earth. Some of them are trained to uncover the secrets left beneath the earth's surface and help us learn about its past and also our past. This means many people study the earth's surface to understand how it has changed over time. Observe these 4 pictures and the activities involved. From top left, geologists study the physical features of the earth like the soil, stones, hills, mountains, rivers, seas, oceans and other such parts of the earth. So, a geologist is a scientist who studies the natural parts of the earth such as soil, rocks, hills, mountains, rivers, seas and oceans. Paleontologists study the remains of plants, animals and humans from millions of years ago in the form of fossils. So what is the meaning of fossils? Impressions or footprints are parts of plants or animals that are found preserved within layers of soil or rocks. So, fossils are old bones, footprints, or parts of plants and animals that got saved inside the ground or rocks. And a paleontologist is a scientist who studies the fossilized remains of plants, animals, and humans from millions of years ago. Anthropologists study human societies and cultures from the oldest times to the present. An anthropologist is a scientist who studies human societies, cultures, and how people lived from ancient times to today. Archaeologists study the past by digging up remains that people, plants, and animals left behind, such as tools, pots, beads, figurines, toys, bones, and teeth of animals and humans, burnt grains, parts of houses, or bricks, among others. So, an archaeologist is a scientist who studies the past by digging up old remains left behind by people, animals, and plants. They find things like tools, pots, beads, toys, etc., which help them learn how people lived a long time ago. How is time measured in history? Each society and culture has had its own ways of measuring time. Major events such as the birth of an important person or the start of a ruler's reign have often marked the beginning of a new era. At present, the Gregorian calendar is commonly used worldwide, side by side. Hindu, Muslims, Jewish, Chinese, and other calendars are also used for calculating the dates of festivals and other auspicious events. The new words we are going to learn here are era. Era is a distinct period of time. It's used to talk about events that happen during that time. Next is Gregorian calendar. The calendar now used the world over. It has 12 months adding up to 365 days and a leap year every 4 years. However, century years, for example, 1800, 1900, 2000 are leap years only if they are multiples of 400. So, in the 3 centenary years above, only 2000 is a leap year. Today, the Gregorian calendar based on the birth of Christ is the most widely used in the world. Gregorian calendar is the calendar we use today. It has 12 months and 365 days in a year. Every 4 years, one extra day is added to the year. This special year is called a leap year and the extra day is added to the month of February, making it 29 days instead of 28. But years like 1800 or 1900 are leap years only if the number can be divided by 400. So, only 2000 was a leap year. Next word is auspicious. Auspicious, favorable or bringing luck, for instance, an auspicious beginning. So, auspicious means something that is lucky or good and brings success, happiness. What we learn here? We learn that different societies and cultures throughout history have had their own systems for measuring time. Often, the beginning of a new era was marked by major events like birth of a great leader or a start of a king's rule. Today, the Gregorian calendar, which is based on the birth of Christ, is the most widely used calendar in the world. And many cultures use their own traditional calendars to celebrate festivals and religious events. For example, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, and Chinese calendars are used by people to know when to celebrate their festivals and religious events. In the West, the conventional year for Jesus Christ's birth has generally been taken to be the starting point for this calendar. Years are counted forward from this point and used to be marked with AD, an abbreviation for a Latin phrase that refers to the years after Jesus' birth. However, This is now called the Common Era or CE across the world. For example, 1947, the year India gained independence, can be written as 1947 AD. Sometimes AD 1947 or 1947 CE. So, in many Western countries, the calendar starts from the time people believe Jesus Christ was born. Years after his birth were written as AD, which comes from a Latin phrase. Today, people around the world mostly use CE, which means Common Era. For example, the year India became independent can be written as 1947 AD or 1947 CE. Both means the same year. Similarly, the years before the conventional date for the birth of Jesus are counted backward and used to be marked with BC or before Christ. They are now called before Common Era or BCE. For example, 560 BCE is an approximate year of birth of Gautama Buddha, whom we will meet in chapter 7. Can you calculate how many years ago that was? So, years before Jesus Christ's birth are counted backward and called BC, before Christ. Now we say BCE, which means before Common Era. For example, Gautama Buddha was born around 560 BCE. Such calculations are simple, but there is a catch. In the Gregorian calendar, there is no year 0. The year 1 CE follows immediately the year 1 BCE. Draw a simple timeline marking every year from 2 BCE to 2 CE. You will see that because of the absence of a year 0, only 3 years have passed between those two dates. So, to calculate the number of years between a BCE date and a CE date, you should add them but subtract 1. In the above case, 2 plus 2 minus 1 equals 3. So, in Gregorian calendar, there is no year 0. That means the year 1 BCE is followed immediately by the year 1 CE. So, if you're counting how many years passed between BCE and CE, you can't count a year 0 in between because there is no year 0. From 2 BCE to 1 BCE, 1 year. From 1 BCE to 1 CE, 1 year. From 1 CE to 2 CE, 1 year. So, that's 3 years, not 4, because there is no 0 in between. So, when you calculate years between a BCE date and a CE date, always remember BCE year plus CE year minus 1 equals total years between them. We add the 2 years, but we subtract 1 because of that missing year 0. For example, Buddha was born in 560 BCE. So, to calculate the years, we need to add 560 plus, if we are in 2024 CE, 560 plus 2024 minus 1, that is equal to 2583 years. So, Buddha was born 2583 years ago. A timeline. See figure 4.3 on pages 62 and 63 is a convenient tool to mark such events, as it shows a sequence of dates and events covering any particular period. It runs from the beginning of humanity to the present with a few important landmarks. Note that the dotted portion marks a skip period, otherwise this timeline would have to be almost 3 meters long. So, a timeline helps us see important events in history in the order they happened. It starts from the beginning of human life and goes up to today. The dotted part in the timeline shows a time gap that is skipped to save space. Otherwise, the timeline would be very long, almost 3 meters. A timeline also helps in understanding the order in which historical events take place. For example, even without looking at dates, you can now see that the birth of Buddha occurs before that of Jesus. A timeline helps us understand the order of historical events. It shows which events happened first and which came later. For example, in this picture, we can see that Gautama Buddha was born before Jesus, even without checking the exact dates. Along with a year and a decade, a period of 10 years, we often use other terms to understand longer durations of time. Two of these are quite commonly used when learning about history, which means we use words like year and decade. Decade means 10 years to talk about longer periods of time. Two of these are often used when we learn about history. First one, century. It is any period of 100 years. In history, specific centuries are counted every 100 years starting from the year 1 CE. For instance, we are currently in the 21st century CE, which runs from 2001 to 2100. A century means 100 years. In history, we count centuries starting from the year 1 CE. For example, the 21st century CE started in the year 2001 and will end in 2100. The centuries BCE are calculated beginning from the year 1 BCE and keep going back in time. For example, the 3rd century BCE would include the years 300 BCE to 201 BCE. Centuries BCE are counted backward starting from the year 1 BCE. So, the 3rd century BCE means the years from 300 BCE to 201 BCE. Second point, millennium. It is any period of 1000 years. In history, specific centuries are counted every 1000 years from the year 1 CE. For instance, we are currently in the 3rd millennium CE, which began in 2001 CE and will go up to 3000 CE. So, a millennium means 1000 years. In history, millenniums are counted from the year 1 CE. Right now, we are in the 3rd millennium CE, which started in the year 2001 and will end in the year 3000. As with centuries, millenniums BCE are also calculated beginning from 1 BCE and go backwards. So, the first millennium BCE would include the years 1 BCE to 1000 BCE. So, like centuries, millenniums BCE are also counted backward from the year 1 BCE. So, the first millennium BCE is from 1 BCE to 1000 BCE. In the timeline given on pages 62 and 63, figure 4.3, can you mark the beginning of the 8th millennium BCE? Note, in English, the plural of millennium is millenniums or millennia. Both are correct. In the timeline shown on pages 62 and 63, figure 4.3, we need to find and mark the beginning of the 8th millennium BCE. The 8th millennium BCE includes the years from 8000 BCE to 7001 BCE. So, the beginning of the 8th millennium BCE is at 8000 BCE. Also note that the plural form of millennium can be millenniums or millennia. Both are correct. Do you know how calendars have been traditionally made in India? Many Indian calendars rely on the positions of the sun and the moon to define the months of the year. A Panchanga is a book of tables which lists the days of each month along with related astronomical data. For instance, it precisely predicts events like solar and lunar eclipses, times for sunrise and sunset, etc. Panchangas, still widely used in India, often also give weather predictions for the year, dates, and timings of festivals, and more. So, in India, calendars are often made by looking at the positions of the sun and the moon. A special book called a Panchanga shows the days of each month and gives details like sunrise and sunset times. It also tells about festivals, eclipses, and even weather predictions. People in India still use Panchangas to plan important events. What are the sources of history? Source of history means a place, person, text, or an object from which we gather information about some past event or period. A source of history is something like a place, person, book, or object that helps us know about events from the past. We use it to learn and understand history. Can you collect information about at least 3 generations of your family on your mother's and father's sides? Create a family tree with your parents, grandparents, and great grandparents. Find out their names, what they did for a living, and where they were born. Also, write the sources from where you got this information. So, you need to collect information about 3 generations of your family on your mother's and father's sides. How did you find details about your family's past? Did you rely on things like photographs, diaries, ID cards, or memories from your parents and relatives? Have you ever seen old coins, books, clothes, jewelry, or utensils in and around your house? What type of information can we gain from such objects or from old houses or buildings? Every object or structure tells a story and is like a piece in a jigsaw puzzle. The objects that you see around your house convey something of the history of your family. Similarly, we can put together historical events through a variety of sources, but keep in mind that in the case of history, quite a few pieces of the puzzle may remain missing. So, every object or structure has a story to tell and can give clues about the past, just like puzzle pieces that help complete a picture. The things in your home can show parts of your family's history. In the same way, we can understand historical events by using different sources, but sometimes not all the information is available. So, parts of the story may be missing. Observe the figure at the bottom of the page. It brings together the main sources of history. You do not need to remember them all now. We will use some of them as we go along. When historians study, say, a king or queen of 1500 years ago, an ancient monument, a war, or some items of trade, they take great care to gather information from as many sources as they can find and consult. Sometimes the sources confirm each other. The jigsaw pieces match. At other times, sources may give contradictory information. The jigsaw pieces don't match, in which case they need to decide which source they can trust more. That is how they try to recreate the history of the period they are studying. So, who is a historian? A person who studies and writes about the past. Historians learn about history by using many different sources like old monuments, stories, or objects. When studying something from long ago like a king or a war, they carefully look for as many sources as possible. Sometimes the information from these sources agrees and fits together like puzzle pieces. Other times the information doesn't match. So historians have to decide which source is more reliable. This helps them build the most accurate picture of the history. In this picture, we can see some important sources of history. These sources help us learn about the past. Who contributes to all these sources of history? Historians themselves, but also archaeologists, epigraphists who study ancient inscriptions, anthropologists who study human societies and their cultures, experts in literature and languages, and some more. In addition, in the last 50 years or so, scientific studies have been contributing more and more to the reconstruction of the past. For example, studies of ancient climates, chemical studies of excavated materials, and studies of the genetics of ancient people have provided fresh insights which supplement the more usual sources. And when historians study recent history, which usually means the last 2 or 3 centuries, another source is newspapers. For the last few decades, electronic media, television, the internet, etc., can also be consulted. So, what do you mean by genetics? Genetics, the branch of biology that studies how in plants, animals, or humans certain features or characteristics get passed down from one generation to the next. Genetics is a part of science that studies how plants, animals, and people get certain features from their parents. For example, you might have got your mom's eye color or your dad's hair type because of genetics. So, from this paragraph, we learn that many people help collect and study history. Not just historians, but also archaeologists who dig up old things, epigraphists who read ancient writings, anthropologists who study people and their cultures, and experts in languages and literature. In recent years, scientists have also helped by studying ancient climates, materials, and even the genetics of old people. For recent history, newspapers and electronic media like TV and the internet are important sources of information. The beginnings of human history. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, walked the planet for about 3 lakh years. This appears to be a very long time, yet it is only a tiny fraction of the Earth's history. Let us have a quick look at our early history. That is, modern humans called Homo sapiens have lived on Earth for about 3 lakh years. Although this seems like a very long time, it is actually just a small part of the Earth's entire history, which is much, much older. In the above picture, look at some activities of early humans in a rock shelter. Which ones can you recognize? Give a brief description for each. So, in this picture, we can see early humans making tools, cooking food, drawing on walls, etc. Early humans faced many challenges from nature and lived in bands or groups to help each other. They were constantly seeking shelter and food and were mainly hunters and gatherers. This means that they relied on hunting and collecting edible plants and fruits for their survival. Our early ancestors also had certain beliefs about the natural elements and possibly also some notion of afterlife. Afterlife means a life that begins after death. So, this paragraph tells us that early humans had to deal with many difficulties in nature. They lived in small groups to help and protect each other. They looked for shelter and food mostly by hunting animals and gathering plants and fruits. They also had some beliefs about nature and maybe about life after death. These groups lived in temporary camps, rock shelters, or caves and communicated with each other using languages that are now lost. They used fire and started making objects that made their lives easier, like improved stone axes and blades, arrowheads, and other tools. Aspects of their life are visible in rock paintings found in hundreds of caves all over the world. Some of those paintings depict simple figures or a few symbols. Others are more detailed and represent scenes with animals or humans. In time, these early humans learned to make simple ornaments such as stone or shell beads, pendants made of animal teeth, and sometimes exchanged them with other groups. So, Early humans lived in places like temporary camps, caves, or rock shelters. They spoke languages that we don't know today. They used fire and made tools like stone axes, blades, and arrowheads. They also created rock paintings in caves showing animals and people. Over time, they made simple jewelry from stones, shells, or animal teeth and sometimes traded them with other groups. The first crops. Over long ages, the Earth's climate has gone through many changes. At certain times, it was very cold and much of the Earth was covered with ice. This is called an ice age, as you will learn in greater detail in science. Later, when the climate warmed up, this ice partly melted and the resulting waters swelled the existing rivers and eventually drained into the oceans. The last ice age lasted from over 1 lakh years ago to around 12,000 years ago. So, over many years, the Earth's climate has changed a lot. Sometimes it got very cold and large parts of the Earth were covered with ice. That time is called an ice age. Later, when the Earth became warmer, some of the ice melted, causing rivers to get bigger and flow into the oceans. The last ice age lasted from about 1 lakh years ago to around 12,000 years ago. Afterwards, living conditions improved for humans. In many parts of the world, they started settling down and cultivating cereals and grains. They also domesticated animals such as cattle, goats, etc. With more food available, these communities grew in size and number and often settled down near rivers. This was not only because of the availability of water, but also because the soil would be more fertile there. It made the process of growing crops easier. So, after the ice age, life became easier for humans. People began to live in one place instead of moving around. And they started growing crops like wheat and rice. They also started domesticating animals like cows and goats. With more food, their communities became bigger and they often settled near rivers because of water and fertile soil, which helped them grow more crops. Observe the scene on the next page. It depicts an agricultural community from a few millenniums ago. List the main activities you can identify. Both in the earlier picture of a rock shelter and in this one, men and women are given certain roles. While they may appear to be natural, they are not necessarily accurate and do not cover all situations. For instance, in a rock shelter, women may have helped prepare colors for painting the rock or may have done some of the painting. In both scenes, men may have done some of the cooking or may have helped take care of children. So, the pictures show men and women doing certain jobs. But these roles might not always be correct. For example, women could have helped make paint or done some painting on the rocks. And men might have cooked or looked after the children. So, men and women may have shared different tasks. As communities grew, so did their social complexity. Leaders or chieftains were responsible for the well-being of the people, and everyone collectively worked towards the community's welfare. For example, there was no sense of individual ownership. The lands were collectively sowed and harvested. Welfare here means health, prosperity, and well-being. And chieftain is a leader of a tribe or a small group of people. So, as communities grew bigger, their way of living became more organized. Each group had a leader called a chieftain who looked after the well-being of the people. Everyone in the group worked together. At that time, there were no individual owners. Everyone shared the land and they sowed and harvested crops together. As time went by, hamlets grew into sizable villages that exchanged goods, mostly food, clothing, and tools. Slowly, networks of communication and exchange were established among those villages, and some of them grew into small towns. New technologies appeared, for example, pottery for making pots and other clay objects, and the use of metal, copper first, iron later, which helped make durable tools, objects of daily use, and ornaments. Hamlet, a small settlement or small village. So, over time, small villages became bigger and started trading things like food, clothes, and tools. Villages connected with each other, and some grew into small towns. New inventions appeared like pottery to make clay pots, and metals like copper and iron, which help people make stronger tools and beautiful jewelry. We will see in chapter 6 how this stage prepared for the emergence of what is called civilization. For now, it is important to remember that this early progress of humanity had to face many challenges. At some critical times, humanity could have almost disappeared, as some earlier species did. We will never know those early humans to whose courage and persistence we owe our existence today. This paragraph tells us that the early progress of humans was very important because it led to the start of what we call civilization, which we will learn later. But during this time, people faced many hard challenges, and sometimes they almost didn't survive. We may never know much about those early humans, but we should remember that because of their bravery and hard work, we are here today. Before we move on, we have explored some ways to learn more about our past. The concept of a timeline helps us understand the sequence of historical events at different times. There are different ways of measuring time: years, decades, centuries, millenniums. Sources of history are many. They help us reconstruct and interpret historical events. We have also had a brief look into the lives of early humans and how human societies grew more complex in time. So, we have learned some ways to study the past. A timeline helps us see when events happened in order. We measure time in years, decades, centuries, and millenniums. Many different sources help us understand history better. We also learned a little about early humans and how their communities became more advanced over time. So we have completed chapter 4, Timeline and Sources of History. We hope you found it useful and easy to understand. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Kidzpedia for more videos. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again in our next video. Bye bye.